I'll start off by saying this is not a topic I thought I would speak on. And about 3.5, 4 weeks ago, I was scratching my head about what topic, and I had outlines and things going. And then this came through my inbox. And we're going to start off a little different than we normally start off with. I'd like to ask Keith if he would read Psalms 139, verses 1 through 12, to kind of set our mindset.
Psalms 139, 1 through 12. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my downsitting and my uprising. Thou understandest my thought far off. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquitted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thy hands upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is I cannot attain unto it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night hideth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee.
Thank you, Keith. The verse that this lesson centers around is Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. What's mentioned here is falsehood. Well, the definition of falsehood is an untrue statement, a lie, an inaccuracy, the practice of lying, or the lack of conformity to truth or fact, and inaccuracy. Now, that's a nice textbook, concrete definition. But let's look a little further. In Job 1:1, there was a man in the land whose name was Job, and that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. Job says, if I have walked with falsehood, my foot has hastened after deceit. Let him weigh me with accurate scales, and let God know my integrity. Did he follow after deceit? In the context of falsehood, did he lie? Did he deceive? He says, if I have, make it known to me, for I do not believe I have. And we all know the story of Job. The Lord let the devil have his way with him because he was beyond reproach. His wife deserted him. His family was taken away. His friends turned against him. Yet he still did not speak or deceive or lie. That was his integrity. In Psalms 7:14 through 16, the one's missing up there. Behold, he travails with wickedness. He conceives mischief, brings forth falsehoods. He has dug a pit and hollowed it out, and has fallen into the hole which he made. His mischief will return upon his own head, and his violence will descend upon his own pate is the word, and the word means head. My box got jiggled up right there. But he travails with wickedness. He keeps and travels with bad company. He dug a pit and fallen into the hole he made. We of common times say, yeah, keep digging your hole. You're getting in pretty deep. He's saying here, if you're keeping bad company, you're deceiving, you're lying, you're perpetuating falsehoods, digging your own pit. and it will return upon him. Somebody else is going to be filling it in as you keep digging. Now, I've said all this, and I haven't referred back to what Heath read for us. Keep in mind Psalm 139. No matter what we do, God knows everything. And if one of those verses in there says, He knows before the words get to our tongues. In Isaiah 20, let me back up a slide here. Jeff got into a little bit this morning in class, which is why I made the comment. The Pharisees had been digging their pit for a very long time. As Nathan said this morning, the first generation, we just did a little bit. Okay, they took the first shovelful out. Each generation kept taking more and more shovelsfuls out until Jesus. And at that point, Jesus was standing up there and his word was covering them back over because their own lies and deceit had finally caught up with them. Isaiah 28. Judah is warned. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord, O scoffers, who rule this people who are in Jerusalem. Who rule this people who are in Jerusalem? Because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have made a pact. The overwhelming scourge will not reach us when it passes by, for we have made falsehood our refuge, and we have concealed ourselves with deception. The Pharisees are a perfect example of this. They've convinced themselves of what they say is true. The comment I found on this was intoxicated with false doctrines and notions concerning the kingdom and salvation of the Messiah. They not only err themselves, but they lead multitudes astray. We were talking this morning in class how the scribes and the Pharisees were the literate ones. They could read. They could tell the people of what the scrolls said. They didn't tell the truth. The people didn't know any different. They have believed their own lies that aligning with others, nations, will protect them. So we too create the same facade around ourselves that we believe our own words and we deceive ourselves. Oh, my boxes are off, but that's okay. You'll get my. In Genesis 3:13 through 15, the serpent deceived me, the first lie, and I ate. The Lord said, and I looked for the second lie, and it wasn't Eve. She confessed that she ate the apple, so she didn't tell the next lie. Because you have done this, cursed are you more than all cattle, more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between you, your seed, and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. Genesis chapter 3, the first lie. The serpent is cursed. Okay, wait a minute. Let's think about that. God is cursing someone or a being? That's pretty serious. Think about how else does God curse someone? It kind of tells us right there in the beginning in Genesis how serious lying and deceit is. And then man was banished from the garden because of it. In Colossians 3, verses 9 through 10. Do not lie one to another, since you laid aside the old self with its evil practices and have put on the new self, who is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created him. You put on Christ. You change. So don't lie one to another. Strive to be like Christ. They tried to tempt Christ. the devil tried in a variety of ways, never succeeded. In Titus 1 and verse 2, in the hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised. God's not deceiving us. He's not telling us a lie. We may lie to ourselves. We may deceive ourselves by reading and thinking things that are not in the scripture, or maybe even ignoring the scriptures and saying, oh, it's just a bunch of stories, which is something I've come to realize here recently in news articles. The Bible is now being referred to commonly as a book of stories. Think about that. A book of stories. Oh, it's just the same as if I pick up Hans Christian Andersen. It's the same as if I pick up the Iliad and the Odyssey from back when, I forget the year in which it was published or written. But those are old stories. Now the Bible is being treated in common press and common print the same way, a book of stories. They are deceiving themselves to make themselves feel good. They don't have to deal with it. So what led me to all this? What changed my mind about this topic? And that email I got was my daily devotional that I read. Sometimes I'm a week behind, but I still read it. This little piece of it's what pointed out that this is maybe a more not maybe, it is a more serious topic than we give it credit for. And I can't remember the last time I've heard someone speak on falsehoods or lies. An average person tells 1.65 lies per day. Partial lies, white lies, and untruths. However you slice it and excuse it and try to rationalize it. As I hear a lot, over the years, I've heard people, oh, it's just a white lie. It'll just make them feel good. It won't hurt them. But nonetheless, it's still an untruth. It's still a lie. It's still a deception. But 1.65 times. One is not so bad, right? You see the math. You're ahead of me because you already read the slide. 11 times per week. 602 times a year. 15,000 times in 25 years. Think about how deep that hole is at 25,000. And by the time you get to 25,000 or 25 years with 15,000, what do you mean I didn't tell the truth? Of course that's the truth. Well, that's exactly the way it went, exactly the way it happened. That's the truth. Well, I'm sorry, but in today's age, here's a little camera that sat here and watched and said, yes, you did do such and such. Whether you agree with that or not, but still nonetheless, there's cameras everywhere. But whether it's a camera or it's a person or it's Psalms 139, you're being watched. And I'm not saying that we do, I'd hope not, but think about that. If no one in this room has told a lie, ever, okay, great. But the 1.65 still applies. That means that every person that doesn't believe in God is a part of that 1.65, potentially. Think about the environment you're operating in. And you go out, the people you know, the associates the friends you have that don't believe in God or don't put God first. They're susceptible in this. Go back a couple slides when I talked about bad company. That can wear you down over time and you not realize what you've done because it's okay. We're back to Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor. For we are members of one another. What's a neighbor? There's three parts to a neighbor by definition. One living or located near another had lunch with her next door neighbor. We know what that is. We know what that means. Fellow man, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Matthew 19:19. I did not put Matthew in there. That was a part of the book definition, which I thought was surprising. Number two, an adjective. Being immediately adjoining or relatively near. So a person that's adjoining you or relatively near. So those in your proximity, those near you. To adjoin immediately or lie relatively near to the one. Again, similar to the adjective definition. And an intransitive verb, to live or be located as a neighbor, to associate in a neighborly way. So who's our neighbors? Those around about us. Matthew 19:19. We all know the first part really well. Honor your father and your mother. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And this one gets quoted just as much as the first half. Leviticus 19 and verse 18. You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Love your neighbor. Well, we just talked about who your neighbor is, those round about you and live next door to you or live near you. Love it. How do you love yourself? You take care of yourself. So love that neighbor in that same manner. Honor Exodus 20 and 12 through 16. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't lie, don't deceive your neighbor. And in Romans 13 and 10, love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. There's another saying, treat others the way you want to be treated. Love your neighbor the way you want to be loved. And then that's the fulfillment of the law. If you're treating others in that, and what we're really talking about here is being a servant to another in an honorable, upright manner. Don't lie to them, don't deceive them, but love them and do for them as you would for yourself. It's easy to fall into a trap. And this is a part of why I need to go around this topic. Because I got to thinking about it, and I do not watch broadcast news, period. I do get news headlines. It's not like I don't pay attention to what's going on in the world. But even with respect to that, we live in a false world that has convinced themselves they know what's best. How many times have they tried to create life from a test tube? And they keep finding shortcomings with it, and it's because they're not God. They didn't put conception in man's hands. It's in God's hands. So we live in this false world. It's in the news. And I'm not criticizing anybody who watches the news, so don't take that way. It's in the news. It's TV programming, shows, movies, everything. Co-workers. I mean, when we were truly in the office all the time, all of us that are not retired, we saw it. We could see deception. We could see, well, they told that, they just didn't quite tell the truth. But it was close enough. But it was deceiving. I went with my dad years ago. 40 years ago. take a truck to be worked on. And you walked into this, I don't even know how big the building was, 200 by 300. It was full of trucks and even tractors in there, large equipment. And the shop, the foreman, Dad found him and to find out when could he get his trucks worked on. He said, well, I'd like to tell you to have it for you by Friday, but I'm not sure I can do that. And I'm not going to tell you Friday, because then I got to remember what I told you, to remember what I told him, to remember what I told him, to remember what I told her. I'm not that smart. So I think I'll have it for you in about a week and a half. I'll call you. He wasn't going to be deceptive and put a thought out there and get your perception of when you thought you were going to get it back. He wasn't going to go down that path because he didn't know. You have to kind of look at that and say, he was being upfront about it. Friends. You have friends that you know. Don't quite always tell everything just so. We've all got those around us. Go back to my slide with all the numbers on it. That's a tremendous amount of influence. I've used the illustration before of the little devil angel and the good angel sitting on your shoulder, whispering in your ear, giving you ideas. They don't need to be there. You got enough people around you that are not telling things upright, that you see it, they may treat you that way, then you're tempted to treat them that way. But because that influence is around us everywhere. Embracing God, though, is what sets us apart. Setting our sights and trying to be like God does not mean we're going to be perfect. It does not mean we're not going to tell a lie. And as my little picture up there, yeah, we may end up upside down, slipping and falling, and maybe our hole's not very deep, but nonetheless, we will slip and fall somewhere. Because if you're not practiced at it, you're not good at it. And my comment was, I hope nobody's good at it, because then you're failing at it all the time, which is a good thing. Beware, avoid the temptation of pride, because that's really what drives it, is pride. By nature, mankind never wants to be. Nobody wants to be. And it brings me back to Psalms 139. We're not going to reread it. But to me, that was the bookends. God knows us. He knows exactly what we do, exactly what we're thinking, exactly how we're going to do it. When we start with that thought, and we end with that thought, where do we have room in the middle? We don't. So don't venture off into those things, especially because it's all around us. It's easy. And by the way, if you lie, everybody that's not following Christ is going to say, that's okay. I get it. That was just a little white lie. That's okay. You were trying to spare someone's feelings about that. That's okay. Well, maybe you don't have to be so blunt when you tell them something. Soften it a little bit. But there was something that came, and by the way, as I said, started this about 3 weeks ago. And whether you've prepared a lesson for up here, a Bible class, or something else that you're going to talk to someone about, I think it's inevitable that the few days before, things keep rolling in front to your attention to say, oh, wouldn't this be good to put in there? Well, if I had done that this past week, this would be about 3 times longer. Because it's amazing how many things rolled in and through my devotionals this past week. And by the way, this is separate from that string of devotionals, but it's just interesting. And a couple other things rolled through my inbox. But there is one, and I did not put a slide in here. I never thought about it this way. What did Peter do? 3 times he lied. He did know the Lord. I had never thought about it in that context, and that came through my inbox a couple days ago. I just never thought about it that way. It was never presented that way. It was never a thought. Yeah, we all know, yeah, he denied him. But what he really did was he lied. He deceived. He told a falsehood. And he was one of the apostles. But what did he do? He kept going. He kept going to try to serve the Lord the best he could. Now, emotionally, probably a wreck. After, as the cock crowed the 3rd time, and he realized he'd already been told, which brings me back to Psalms 139. God already knows. We've been studying the Gospels, doing the combined Gospels on Sunday morning. And the one thing we come back to is Jesus knows all those around him as he goes about teaching. The woman who touched his cloak, who had been bleeding for several years, she's the most prominent example because she didn't speak to him. She touched his cloak. He knew it. We've talked about several times about the feed 5,000. He knew what those people were thinking. They wanted their bellies full. And then when he told them that the flesh is me and the bread is me and the fruit of the vine or the nourishment is the blood, they didn't get it and they went someplace else because they were not that dedicated to learn. But Peter had to be confronted with his deception, his lie. But he still continued. And I think that's the key piece for us. Hopefully not, but we may have trouble with this given the wrong situations. Pick yourself up. Admit, move on. Take another step and keep working at it. Now you know something not to do, which is true of anything we stumble. Well, if there's something we can do for anyone, please make that known as we sing our invitation song.